Hello and welcome back to Britannia Motorcycles. Number of things to do today in our sort of ragtime rebuild of this B25/T25, but today is an auspicious day. I just had my birthday, 65, and every year on my birthday we get a change of hats. I always have two hats, one for work and one for Sunday best. And every year my daughter sends me a new hat from the UK, and my work hat mysteriously disappears, so that my Sunday best hat, you'll notice no grease marks, becomes my work hat. Actually my new one is sort of tweedy and not like this. So there you go. Right, what we're going to do today is I've put the crank into the cases and I've put this bearing on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the other case on here, bolt it all up, make sure everything turns nice and freely still. You notice I've put a little protector thing on the conrod here. Then what we're actually going to do is put this into the frame and more or less use the frame as our engine stand, because the complete engine weighs 80 pounds and sort of manhandling it into the frame can be a bit of a chore, and you're always thinking, I don't want to chip my paint. So in this instance what we're going to do is we're going to put it in and then we're going to build it up in the frame. Things like the gearbox are easy because the gearbox actually, nice BSA, gets built up on the plate. It's not like the Triumph one where you're trying to fit everything in. You build the gearbox on the plate and just slap it in, and clutch and everything is the same. We were going to put the sump filter and plate on here, but guess what? Brand new gasket set, no sump filter gaskets in there, so I'm going to have to order them separately. Very annoying. Tools, we always got to talk about tools. I don't suppose this is a tool really, but it's something I'll mention. You may remember when I was working on the sheet metal, I had a slot cut in the table for the jigsaw to go in. Well, I actually have a hole in here for crankshafts to go in. It just makes things a lot easier. Say if you're using a box, all the rest of it, if you've got a bench that you only use for engines, just drill a hole in, about inch and a quarter, something like that. So we're going to do that. We're also really going to get to do the gearbox today, because I mentioned that first gear was total widths, somewhat less. It turned out to be 3/8, 0.188. So I got a thrust washer, the appropriate size, so we're going to be able to build that up. A couple of things arrived. One standard piston, one nice new JV engineering piston. As you can see, it's a short skirt. It's been machined to give me 8.5 to 1. These are 10 to 1. I think I talked about this earlier, but there is an 8.5 to 1 that was in the Fleet Star, which I've never been able to find. But there's a chap in the US called Ed V. I can't remember what the V stands for. Ian V Engineering. And he tunes B25s for flat track and things like that. And he does, I think it's a 12 to 1 piston for them. But it's got a really solid crown. So what I do is I give him a call and he just machines the top. I could do it myself, I suppose, but you know, why bother? He does it for me and the piston's the same price. And it comes out at 8.5 to 1. So we've got our nice new piston, which we will take along today with the cylinder. I got a plus 21. The engine actually probably could have taken a standard piston from the measurements, but you know, as often when you get right down to this this level of stripping it down, it's a false economy to just try and make do. It's going to last for a long time before it needs another rebore, and we have 2 rebores to go. So piston's the same whether I buy a new standard one or an oversized one, so there's only the $50, which is what, 30 quid for the rebore. The other thing that came was the new carburetor. I'm going to put this on. Ian, I mentioned it to Ian, who the bike is going to in the UK, and he didn't say that there was any restrictions on carbs for sort of classic style bikes in the UK. And judging by the amount of cheating that goes on, I don't see why there should be. Really interesting thing with this is, it says on here New yuppie fashion trend. Best choice for your motorcycle. They are actually really good carburetors. They use key hinge jets and needles and stuff, so everything's easy to get. But as a sign of the times, this is made in Taiwan, and you've got to be careful that you don't buy a Chinese knockoff. Would you believe it? So people are even making cheap versions of Taiwanese things. So okay, let's get stuck in with this. I'll bring you in a little bit closer as usual, and we'll put some gasket cement on, put the cases on and bolt them together. Well, you're not going to believe this. I've just been getting compliments about how the videos are getting more and more professional, and I forgot to press the record button. So you saw the intricacy, or I should say you missed the intricacies of me putting this in. There are no intricacies to it. All I did, or all I told you about, was I used a non-setting gasket cement. Do not use one that hardens, because if you ever need to take it apart, or some other poor sod has to take it apart, it's no fun when you find the cases are literally glued together. You just smear it on with your finger. It shouldn't be squeezing out of everywhere. A little bit, yes, but you see sometimes with great lumps sticking out. What else did I mention? I mentioned that I like to clean up all the bolt threads, and I even tap these out to clean them all up. Gasket cement. It's either gasket cement or a gasket, never the two. If you need to put gasket cement on a gasket, then you've got to be looking at the mating faces, because something somewhere is wrong. So anyway, we put a smear around, we popped it on, we put our bolts in. I mentioned that as well as the little yellow things you see me using, when I've got a set of bolts and nuts, I like to just stick them in a bag and they're there, ready. So we popped the two halves together, we tightened it up, and then you see that it still moves nice and freely. You may remember this one had a shim that went under this bearing, and I did measure the bearings to make sure they were exactly the same size as the ones that came out. But to be honest, with stuff you buy now, like with the gasket set, you can never be certain. So you might find it's tight at first. Just give it a little bump on both ends. Now I know Charlie Prescott mentioned, and quite rightly, that you do not hammer on this end, because if you mushroom the end out, you're not going to get a seal, and there's an oil seal that goes around there and the oil goes in there. But if you use some brass or an aluminium hammer, something soft, I'm not talking about wailing on it like this, you just give it a little bump at both ends to settle it into the bearing, and then you'll find that it'll turn nice and freely. So that's that. We're going to oil all the bearings and bushings as we put things together, just the same as we did with the big end shells and the valves going into the guides. We want to give everything a little head start. So that's that done. Now then, next thing we're going to do, after I've ordered gaskets for that, is we're going to put this together. Right. So let's see, here's the lay shaft. Now then, here we have one fixed gear, then this one goes on, then we have a circlip that we're going to put on there. Then this one with its dogs goes on, like so, so it'll slide. There we go. Got it on back to front, Michael. Those dogs. So it'll slide in and out of there. And then this one goes on, with, as you can see, that's been milled out for that to slide into. And then that locks when it's that way, or when, and then this one is free. That slides along, lodges into that one, so it's locked, and this one is then free. So let's put our circlip on. Have you got the circlip pliers? No, you haven't. Boinky boink. Which way are we going? Yes, that's it. Come on now, be a good boy. There it. Nope. Come on, I got you off with these pliers, so must be able to get you on with them. Funny, I was just looking at Charlie Prescott's Otter BSA site. He was the one who mentioned how well the videos were going. He also mentioned how things go wrong in the workshop, and here you have the perfect example. It's one of those, oh, let's just pop this circlip on, and half an hour later, muttering and cursing, it twists and it doesn't want to go on. Come on, you little swine. Of course, somebody's going to put a comment about an easy way to do this. Look, pliers have gone the other way. That's it. So I was saying they'll give me a nice easy dodge to do this. But by then, of course, I'll have already worked myself into a lather. There it goes. Now, which way did that go on? Like that? We'll use that to push it on. It goes like that. Goes like that. Goes like that. That one goes up against the shoulder there. Okay. Now then, and there's a thrust washer that goes on the end of there. Okay, now here's the main shaft. This part is actually going to go, you can still see all this. This part goes into the gearbox. That is where the big nut that holds the sprocket on. This, of course, is the reason why we can't get nice little sprockets, gearbox sprockets for the British bikes. It's because of this concentric design. Because we've got one shaft inside another, this shaft's got to be big, so consequently the sprocket's got to be big. If they were the sort of ones where the shafts are in parallel for the input and the output instead of concentric, then you can get down to an 8 or 9 tooth, and that's an awful lot of teeth off the back. I mean, with a 428 chain, the smallest we can get on here is 13 tooth. So if we could get right down to a 9, say, that's 4 teeth, that's what, 12, 15 on the back. That's a big difference in circumference. Anyway, there's a spacer on there, a thrust washer on there that's going to go in that way. And again we have the slide which goes in there, locks there, or comes back and locks on that one. Now then, we don't have any circlips on this, so you can see the difference in size there. I'll give you the numbers shortly. So what we're going to do is press this onto there, and then I've kept this a tight fit as well, so we're going to press that onto there, and then that will give us the correct, I'll show you this if I can, that there, that there. I got something flat. What do you want to bet? I have nothing flat. They aren't flat. Hold on while I run into the other room. As you can see, there's no wobble. Well, I hope you can see. But anyway, that makes them the same size. So this went on, it goes on flush up against there. There's actually the tiniest little bit of collar that holds it off here. It's only a few thou, but it stops it from touching that. And then the boss was on the outside, up against the bearing. Up against that bearing. So what we're going to do is we're going to press this on and then that, and that's going to give us exactly the same thickness as that with its boss. So let me go and stick that in the press and then we'll come back to this. Our problem here is that we've got threads on both ends, so we can't just stick that in. So what I've done is I've searched around and I found an old gear that is a nice tight fit on the shaft and comes up against the end of these splines. So that will go on there, that will go onto there, and that will go down onto there. Tube to go over it. And wear safety glasses and stuff. I was watching a video the other day of people pressing, supposedly at a trading place, pressing a crank pin out, and one man was down there holding things like this. It was frightening. There, that goes on nice and easily. Need a bigger tube. I've got down to the other splines and then this tube isn't quite big enough. How about that? Yes, but we need a little something on the top of that. Look at this, Charlie, you've been the kiss of death for me. Not going like that. Nope. Come on. Oh, is that shorter? Nope. And that's all the way up to the top. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Only just. And down we go to the bottom. Now you can see that still spins. It's got the tiniest little bit of play. That's just how it should be. Actually, I'm battling here against the battery on the camera. I just noticed as I was setting up it was flashing red. So that goes on there. Actually, that just about knocks on. Yes, it does. That just knocks on. So there we are on, and as I say, that spins nicely. So I hope when I get to the other side of the camera, everything's still okay. We'll go and we can build up the gearbox. Before we start putting the this cover with the gearbox internals together, I have another repair to do. Here's the gear change, which as you can see, well, the gear change shaft, all comes as one piece. These come out on little springs with little pins that hold them in. But this part is basically one piece. And as we all know, over time the splines get worn, particularly if the gear change lever hasn't been kept on nice and tightly. The splines wear, and then the old dodge, when I was a lad anyway, was you would put your gear change lever on, get it to the position you wanted it on a bike, and then you would drill right through lever and shaft, put a pin in. But what we are going to do is an actual proper repair. Now, again, I don't know if you can get these at home, but here my supplier has a new shaft with nice new splines on it. And what you do is you cut the old shaft off and weld the new one on. You're going to do it up here somewhere. So Now of course the really important thing with this is to keep the shaft straight. So we want to be able to hold it. So I made a really simple little jig, which is this piece here. I got a piece of small angle, just the right size to hold that. And then I welded a piece of plate to it. Then I cut that section out. See, I welded that on in one piece to make sure it stayed straight while it was all welded on. Cut that piece out, and then 2 slots. And what we do is, when we've cut this in 2, cut it, we put a nice V on that end, we cut this, put a V on that end, and then they go in there, just simply with a Jubilee clip, or a hose clip as it's called here. We fasten the 2 halves in, and there's enough space to be able to get in and weld it. Now when you're doing this, what you have to be careful of is how you measure. Now you can see there that the splines and the relief for the pinch bolt aren't exactly the same. Now the relief for the pinch bolt dictates where the lever is going to be. So if you cut this, if you just measured the length of it and did it, you might find the relief's a bit further in, and then when you put everything together, the gear change lever is going to be right up against the cover. I suppose it doesn't matter if you went too far out, because then you just have the lever sticking out. So what we're going to do is we will measure from here to the relief. Then we're going to cut this there so it's nicely in the middle of the jig. Then we'll measure that, and then we'll measure from the relief to where we want to cut this, so that when we put the 2 pieces back together again, the relief is in the same place. Then we'll weld it up. So we will get on and do that. Now I've marked this from the centre of the relief to the shoulder. It's 2 5/8. So I'm going to cut this off. I'm just going to cut it with a cutting wheel, because we're going to be V-ing this, so we don't need any very special cuts. What we do need is this stupid vice to grip. Now try again. So, there's that cut. We won't touch the bit on the floor. Now then, this piece that we have left is 1 inch, which is what I wanted it to be, because it made the maths easier. So if we, from there to there is 1 inch, and we want to be 2 5/8, that's 1 5/8 from the centre of these splines, or from the centre of the groove to where we want to cut it. 1 5/8. Here, of course, just as when we're cutting a bit of wood, we've got to make sure that we cut on the waste side. I've got to get it right. So the next thing I'm going to do is just chamfer the end of these and then we'll put it in the jig. But we don't want too many sparks, so I'll bring you back in a minute. Here it is with the two ends chamfered and fastened into the jig. You'll notice actually I didn't use the slot here because I remembered when I fastened it in that using the slot there tended to kink this a little bit. Well, not kink it, what's the word? Kick it up a little bit at the end, and they weren't exactly straight. So I put it right round the whole thing. There it's fine, it pulls it straight down into the shorter one, but here it was pulling it down. I couldn't understand why it didn't line up. And then I remembered that had happened, so I just moved the strap along. So now they're all nicely in line. I'll put a little root weld in, and then I'll fill it. And finally with the cap weld, I'm going to go bigger than the actual shaft so that I can then put it in the lathe and get this nice and even, the same thickness all the way through, so it'll slide through the case nicely. I'm not going to show you the welding, so I'll get it welded and then we'll come back and we'll turn it in the lathe and that'll be ready. And there it is, welded up, turned down in the lathe. I've put a white background behind it so you can see that it's nice and straight. And actually going that way. There we go. Nicely repaired, good splines on it. I'm ready for a Newcastle Brown. I can get that in the States, you know. Actually, I can get Theakson's Old Peculiar as well, but I haven't got any of that at the moment. So that's a job done. We'll see you again.